This podcast is part of the Midwest Podcast Network. Find out more about our other shows and how to support our network at midwestpodcastnetwork.com. You are now tuned in to Westworld FM, a podcast about HBO's Westworld. My name is Alex.
And my name is still Nick.
Today we will be discussing Season 2, Episode 5 of the show, titled Akane no Mai. We will not be discussing the next time on preview at the end of the show, but we will be spoiling everything through Season 2, Episode 5 of the series, so please pause and go catch up if you're not current on the show. You can find more episodes of our podcast on westworld.fm. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can send feedback to westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. If you enjoyed this show or any other show on the Midwest Podcast Network, please consider heading over to patreon.com/MidwestPodnet. That's MidwestPodnet, and pledge as little as $1 a month to help us make our network even better. Special thanks to Jason K., who's pledged at the level of $10 a month. This week, no corrections, no feedback, nothing of the sort, which, is okay. But please.
Yay, for 100% accuracy.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's that or if it's just, we didn't make any mistakes worth bothering to write in about.
I'm sure we made a few little boo-boos here and there.
Well, anyway, it doesn't mean we can't correct them later on. But
sure.
Please talk with us at westworldfm@gmail.com or on Twitter. We're there.
Yeah, there's no way that you finish an episode of this show and think, I have nothing to say about
nothing
that.
to add.
What's the line from Inception? There's really nothing left to say, or something like that.
I don't know. I haven't watched it recently enough. So, but we can get on with the episode recap. I did want to say Akane no Mai. In Japanese, Akane is her name, obviously. Yep. There's somebody on the Small Questions thread on Reddit schooled me a little bit in that Aka itself, the root of her name, means red. And her name means like a deep red, essentially. But Aka no Mai, the no is a possessive, meaning it's Akane's something, and Mai is dance. So it's Akane's Dance is the name of the title of the episode.
Pretty cool.
Makes sense. But she also gave a dance that ended with a lot of red.
True.
So deep red. And so it works on many levels, as everything does.
As most Westworld. Titles of this show do.
Yes. But, let's get on with it. We start this episode opening on the 2 weeks later time frame. We see Bernard bewildered and looking on as hosts that were drowned in the flooded valley get staged in the mesa. Carl Strand learns from Mr. Costa that roughly 1/3 of the recovered hosts have blank chestnuts in them, like they never had any data written in them ever. Also, the cradle has been completely lost, and the cradle had all of the host backups. So we learned some stuff. Mm-hmm. The cradle holds the backup for all the hosts, and if 1/3 of them that they're recovering are blank, that means that they've completely lost track of that data. They have no way of restarting those hosts, essentially, without finding the data elsewhere, which should be in Abernathy.
That's true. Yeah, he's basically a mobile offsite backup, isn't he?
Yes. So, but no, learning that little bit about the cradle was interesting. The fact that 1/3 of the hosts are empty.
Now, do you think that means they were existing hosts that were scrubbed, or do you think they are new hosts that were never given anything? They're just there as like filler.
I personally think these are host bodies of existing hosts that had empty chestnuts placed in them.
So their regular chestnuts were removed and swapped out.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's a weird Trojan horsey thing going on here.
Oh, definitely.
Like they're going to pull all of them in and they're all going to wake up and kill everybody.
It seems a little obvious.
Heavily telegraphed at this point.
That was a note that I had from the end of, was it episode 2 where they were all revealed in the mesa, or was it episode 1? Where they were in the lake.
Episode 1 is when they were in the flooded valley, yeah.
Okay.
That was the end of it. And
For some
Bernard
reason,
says that he killed them all.
He killed them all. That was episode 1. Okay. For some, I know I had a note in my phone, but I didn't talk about it in the first episode. I think maybe I meant to talk about it in episode 2, but then obviously I wasn't here.
Yeah.
But I just said it reminded me of like, it's in a lot of like cop movies and stuff, the idea of an orgy of evidence where it's like too much evidence in that it makes it seem like it's not an actual crime scene. It's been staged that way.
Interesting.
And that's a term that gets thrown around in a lot of like fiction like that. And as soon as I saw all that, I was like, no, this is not legit. These are not lemmings that just all ran off the cliff and like drowned. And
yeah.
And I think you and John even brought up like, or you mentioned it at some point. Christopher Nolan said they don't need oxygen. Jonathan Nolan, I'm sorry. Yeah. Chris Nolan just popped his head in. They don't need air, and then left. Jonathan said, yeah, they don't need it. So I was like, they're totally dormant. They're sitting there waiting for some sort of activation code.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems that way anyway. Could be wrong.
They're really playing the slow game on this section. We're getting like 120 seconds of screen time from this time frame per episode.
This is the story thread that I feel like is really going to yank the rug out from under us. I feel like there's something where we're being drip fed it so slowly and generally towards the front of the episode that other stuff comes in and pushes that out of our
forget about it,
mind. Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden it's going to come around in just a gnarly way.
Yeah, like I think the Days After Ford timeline is going to catch up to this at some point, probably at the end of episode 9 or something, and then maybe we'll see the fallout of everything that happens. But
I think we're working our way towards the logical conclusion of how it got there, but it's going to be something really unexpected.
Yeah. 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 It seems obvious, which is, with this show, anything that seems obvious is likely wrong.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking forward, you're looking in the wrong direction.
Exactly. But yeah, there was Strand does give a very cryptic set of dialogue when we wrap up that scene.
That's quite a story you gave them. One hell of an ending. How did all these disparate threads come together to create this nightmare? If we figure that out, we'll know how the story turns.
It seemed extremely on the nose, and it makes me wonder what they're attempting to, like, is he just simply acting as like an audience surrogate, kind of being like, oh, this is a weird mystery for you all to figure out? Or is it like, are they trying to tell us something that we don't understand as of yet?
Is he just saying that?
He's kind of looking at Bernard.
Okay.
And saying it, I think, is the...
Like to Bernard / Ford, basically, kind of just, he's just kind of musing aloud. Like.
Yeah, well, I think because Bernard is standing there looking at the pyramid of hosts with Teddy at the top of it, because that's amazing. And then also just shirtless Teddy laying atop the hosts. But he's just looking at Bernard, who's in another room, and says these lines, and it just felt very... like a little bit off to me. It was a little off-putting in terms of like, it set me off of my balance. It made me feel as though it felt a little out of place and kind of metatextually aware of Strand to be saying that.
It is slightly, I don't want to say out of character because Strand is a pretty thin character so far, but he feels like he's more there. He's more business, for him to start thinking about like the, yes, the wonders of the story. It's a little,
Yeah.
A little funky.
How did our fiction bring us here?
He pulls out a pipe and starts musing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It felt like a very John Moore line for him to say from The Alienist.
Oh my God, could you imagine if Luke Evans was on this show? If he was Strand?
Ugh.
I wonder if Strand is on the level. I wonder if he's actually...
That was the other... and I'm glad you said that. Because Malling is the woman who's out on the plateau overlooking the flood. And she says, we've got 2 teams looking for Abernathy. And he says, I want you to bring Abernathy to me.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, don't take him immediately to Charlotte, I think is what that implies. So I don't know... exactly what that means, if he thinks Charlotte is not on the level or if he himself is not on the level or what.
That's true.
Yeah, so it could go either way at this point, but we don't have any reason to think Charlotte's not.
Yeah, but I think it's in a lot of these people's nature to not trust anyone else.
Yeah. Well, given the situation they're in, everybody's
exactly.
ready to be duplicitous about something.
So Mei Ling is played by Betty Gabriel. I kind of mentioned you beforehand.
Yeah.
I didn't know who she was at first, but I've recently started following this film critic journalist on Twitter named April Wolf, and she did like an interview and write-up about Betty Gabriel and all the different things she's been in. And she kind of appeared on the scene relatively just a few years ago, and she's been playing all these different roles. But she played Georgina in Get Out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I didn't make that connection at first. And I was like, oh, wow.
It's a wildly different character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely
and
unrecognizable.
Such a different performance. And I've encountered some people lately who have accused a lot of the cast of Get Out of really overacting.
Okay.
And I feel like there may be an argument for that, but I don't agree at all. But I think her performance in Get Out is ridiculously awesome. I loved every second of it. It's amazing.
Well, and the fact that she's striking enough in the seconds of footage we've seen her in the show for us to like take note of her in the first place really kind of tells you that she's something special. So
yeah, I love actors like that can just. It really goes to show you what an unfair profession it is, because some people just have this look about them where they can walk onto the screen and you're just like, who's that?
Yeah.
What's their deal? Even if they're like a side character with like no lines. And those are some of my favorite kinds of actors.
Yeah.
That just seize your attention right off the bat.
For sure. Let's move on. Maeve and crew are actually in Shogun World, and they get captured by a band of Japanese Ronin. Sizemore knows the Westworld malfunction has spread to other parks by the way that the Japanese hosts don't immediately switch to English when they hear him speak it. He also reveals Shogun World was made for those who find Westworld too tame, and that all of the hosts have multiple languages coded into them somewhere. Shogun World is hard mode confirmed.
How sweaty did you get when we like really got into Shogun World? Like, just how stoked were you?
I was extremely stoked. I want to save this conversation after I read through the following scene. But I did want to just note a few things here. I thought Sylvester's kind of like, why don't you say something to them? And Felix being like, I'm from Hong Kong, asshole, was
funny.
Fantastic. And there's a lot of people on Reddit that are like a little skeptical of Shogun World and have the same questions of like, well, how do the swords work and how do the arrows work, like the guns in Westworld and everything like that. So it's kind of, but I was able to just look past that, and I'm kind of like, there's enough hooks in programming and how we know that Westworld works that it doesn't, those types of logic leaps don't bother me anymore. So I don't know if that struck you at all.
No, because I think between what you just said and Sizemore says, like it's hard mode. It's hard, yeah. Like I think you go into that park expecting to maybe get maimed a little bit. Like, I'd imagine you sign a phone book's worth of waivers before going into Shogun World.
Because we learn it's not that the hosts can't necessarily hurt guests in season 1, but they can't kill them. And we see Teddy defend Ford from the Man in Black with a knife in one instance. We know that the hosts are programmed to intervene at a moment's notice in a lot of these cases.
That's very true.
So I feel like...
And the narratives are probably more strictly structured in Shogun World to keep people from just drawing a sword and cutting your head off.
Yes.
Like Sizemore's reaction when things start to go off the rails is like so over the top. And even if something went different in Westworld, he didn't react as big as this. So he seems to think the rules are pretty structured in Shogun World.
Yeah, he knows that it's a much more dangerous place to be, especially with everything malfunctioning. So.
Yes. Sushi World, as we know. Yeah, I think it's interesting that all the hosts have all the languages like embedded in them. That makes a lot of sense and is very cool to think about. Awesome. Like if a Japanese couple walks into Westworld, then everybody starts speaking Japanese to them is such a fascinating concept and very, very awesome. Yeah, didn't he say she has like a dozen languages?
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm sure
she consciously has command of many languages as a madam of a brothel is kind of what he says, but he also says that all of the hosts have all of it in them somewhere. It just needs
to be triggered.
Yes,
basically.
But
Maeve, she's a skeleton key.
Yep. And then he also mentions that her vocal commands don't work because she spoke the wrong language as well. Like, they're not tuned into English, so when she tries to command them in that, it's not necessarily working because they're in Japanese mode. So, all right, the next scene. As the Ronin and their prisoners come into town, everything seems eerily similar. It turns out that Shogun World is almost whole cloth copied from Westworld. We see Hector's robbery of the Mariposa take place in the Shogun World analog to the tune of a Japanese cover of Paint It Black. Armistice and the crew gets the crew freed by helping her Shogun World analog, and Maeve. Armistice gets the crew freed by helping her Shogun World analog, and Maeve puts an end to the heist, asking for a diplomatic talk rather than violence. I am simultaneously so disappointed that Shogun World is a complete copy, and also extremely impressed and fascinated by the idea.
Yeah,
because of the analogs between Japanese filmmaking and Westerns is just such a fascinating duality that they've stumbled across and have like called upon in such a weird way.
Yep.
But I'm also bummed that it's not like this insanely crazy steep. I mean, it's not that it's not accurate to Japan, because it feels like this is what feudal Japan would be, or like Shogun Japan would be like. But there's part of me that wanted it to feel like this unique and wholly different experience, and it's pretty clear that it won't necessarily be that. But what were your thoughts on that?
I think it may be. I don't think it's a complete copy of Westworld. Sizemore says, he's like, I may have borrowed here and there. And I think for certain, like, I think you could call the incident in Sweetwater like a like cornerstone incident of Westworld, because it's right there where you enter. It kind of brings you into the world. It's a big deal. I think taking something like that is logical. It makes a lot of... coming from Sizemore's point of view, it makes a lot of sense. Say, hey, this works really well there. Let me transport that over here as well. I don't think that means the whole of Shogun World, I almost called it Samurai World, is a complete ripoff. I think there's probably a lot more to see there that is unique to that.
That's
world.
Fair. Like, and it makes sense that like the legwork of crafting the little bit of violence and chaos that Hector brings into town is probably such a finely orchestrated system for them to introduce the people who stuck to Sweetwater into something a little riskier and maybe get them to do more. It totally makes sense from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So I guess we don't know yet how much of a total copy it is. Maybe there's some awesome Hattori Hanzo sword crafting.
I think there's probably
somewhere
some
in the
awesome
park,
stuff.
which
I mean, it makes sense too. From like you said, if you're like me, who's not a hardcore gamer, if you play a game through and then you want to play it again on hard mode, it's part of what makes hard mode more possible is having some familiarity with some stuff to draw you in.
Yeah.
Plus, I think even from like just a design and artistic perspective, like you make your next works on the building blocks of the stuff you learned making your first work. So if Westworld was the original park, which it is, as far as we know, and Sizemore was working on that, if then it was time to do this instead, it makes sense to say he took a dozen events from that and put them around Shogun World and then started connecting the tissue, or making the connective tissue between them. Plus, it would be a fun thing for somebody who has been to Westworld who then wants to try out Shogun World to be like, oh, I remember this from... Let's see how it works in this world. Yeah. Plus, it works even better, like you said, with the analogy of the, American cinema being influenced by Japanese and vice versa. Like, it's really funny how East and West continually copy each other.
It's the Ouroboros snake eating its own tail kind of thing going on.
I actually just watched... This is really funny timing. Last night, we were watching The Office, and we watched the episode... where they go to... Are you familiar with like the mid to later seasons of it?
Not much, but I have seen it all.
They go to Gabe's apartment for like the Glee watching party, and Andy is like jealous of him, and he like goes into his room to like check it out, and it's covered in like Japanese stuff. It's like it's totally that idea of like the super nerdy white guy who's obsessed with Japanese stuff, like swords on the wall, and the whole room's in like a red paint scheme, and there's all these like ornate tapestries and stuff. It's really funny. And Daryl comes in, he's like, man, this dude is obsessed with Japan. He's looking around, and as he's like picking up one of the swords, he goes, I wonder if somewhere there's a Chinese dude staring at a bunch of our stuff. And it's the funniest delivery, and it's such an interesting question though, because probably you know what I mean, like there's someone on the other side of the world who's like, oh my god, Western culture is the shit. It's just a bunch of guns.
Well, and like, you know, American people getting tattoos of like Chinese characters, and then when I was in Japan, I always saw a bunch of like T-shirts that have a bunch of meaningless English on them. So it's totally, it goes both ways.
God, do I love that. I love that. That's one of my favorite things to find on Reddit. Like second only to like the face swap things, which you always find and send me, and they're amazing. I love when people get tattoos too of like a kanji, but it's like not the right one. Or like it looks, they're like, oh, this looks so cool, and it just says like butter or something like that.
God,
it's so funny. It's hilarious how we do that. Like we just fixate on the surface, like trappings of another culture, without bothering to dig a little bit deeper.
And actually really understand. What'd you think of the Painted Black cover? I thought it was pretty good.
You know, I'm such a dunce, because while we were watching it, I was like, oh, Painted Black, that's cool. And I was like, that's weird. And then it took like until it really swung into Hector. I was like, oh, that's right. They used Painted Black. They used like a Western. I like somehow that had left my memory.
It's pretty impressive how shot for shot it all is.
I figured it was. I didn't have time to go back, but I figured as I was watching it, I was like, I'll bet this is like remarkably similar.
Like Hector shooting the guy. Hector shoots the dude on the horse, and in this place, Musashi hits the guy with the I think it's the Kudagarami or whatever they call it. He hits him with it on the horse. He gets off, finishes the guy off, steps over to his Armistice analog, throws her. And it's all spot on. Like, it's fascinating to watch it. Seeing how they like the certain characters recycle the lines from the stuff that we've seen. It's all incredible.
It is very cool.
It's worth going through that again. But the only other thing, Sizemore does comment when he's being criticized for the copying of things. He says that he wrote 300 stories in 3 weeks.
Right.
Which, to me, the fact that Sizemore was there when Shogun World began, it seems like that's what this implies. So Shogun World must be kind of recent, relatively at least.
Yeah, we don't know how long Sizemore's been there, but if we guess 8 years, 10 years, like it's probably open within that timeline. Yeah, definitely.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I don't really understand why he only had 3 weeks to do it, but I wonder if we'll delve into that a little more.
I think that is very like just indicative of corporate culture.
Yes. Yeah.
And there were a lot of really awesome comments on the Reddit discussion for this episode where somebody was like, they said they were really surprised how Sizemore is just growing on them and becoming more and more relatable. And they're like, because man, they're like, I've had those kind of deadlines. They're like 300 stories in 3 weeks. They're like, yeah, I've been there. And all these people were chiming in. They're like, yeah, I'm a programmer. And someone's like, I'm a coder. And yeah, I've had to like cram in this many projects. And then they even reinforced the copying of the storyline. They're like, all good coders and programmers will copy stuff and use that as your building block and that kind of stuff. It was really funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a really funny conversation where everybody was simultaneously like saying, I like Sizemore, and then people simultaneously saying, I hate Dolores now. It was really funny.
Yeah.
Watching all these characters trade places.
Absolutely.
Not trade places, but kind of switch favor.
Yeah. All right. The next scene, we see Dolores and Teddy back in Sweetwater for the first time since Ford's death. She wants the train up and running and stripped for speed. They stop for a drink in the Mariposa, and old Clementine gets a look at her replacement performing her part. I don't think there's a whole lot to say here other than watching old Clementine kind of react to the fact that she was replaced, and like she can't even speak.
Yeah,
was really sad and very effectively done.
I love old Clementine. I think she's so awesome.
Absolutely. And so like I'm still a little miffed at the fact that we don't understand what the lobotomy does to them. It's weird to me that she like is cognizant of what's happening around her, but also can't speak and looks kind of dead compared to everyone else.
It is weird.
So I kind of hope we get more on that at some point.
I feel like she probably wasn't she didn't go through the normal rehabbing process that they probably all do.
Yeah.
I think she was rushed out of it.
Yeah.
And the hosts don't know how to do it. So
Yeah.
she just exists in this like gross limbo.
It makes sense to me, but I think because like I was under the impression that like that lobotomy disables them from being functional ever again. So the fact that she has any kind of function is weird to me, and I want that cleared up in some way.
Maybe it's like just winterizing something. Like it just is a way to put them into cold storage.
Yeah,
and not
that's true.
Damage anything.
Maybe they like sever their own ability to command themselves, but yet other people can still kind of direct. And
yeah,
I don't know.
It is. I would be interested to hear a little more. We probably will at some point.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this scene? I don't think there's a whole lot else. We're getting the train. That's all we need to know.
Train's coming.
Maeve and her crew are treated to a geisha performance that gets interrupted by a representative from the shogunate. He wants their best dancer, Sakura, as a gift for the shogun. Akane, the Shogun World analog for Maeve, steps in and kills the man on sight. She requests Musashi the Ronin's help in getting to a place safe from the shogunate. Sizemore recommends Snow Lake, Sakura's home, because there's access to the tunnels there, and Maeve offers to help on their quest. Partly because she wants to go along with Sizemore's plan, and partly because Akane and Sakura's relationship reminds her of her own daughter. Seeing Hector and Maeve and Armistice all react to their analogs is a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool.
And with Sizemore's dialogue, I think is even better. Like he mentions the feedback loops, and then we look over at Armistice and her analog just kind of admiring each other, and I thought that was very good.
Yeah, I think it's Sizemore again is proving to be like a weirdly relatable guy, and he has a good. He's the perfect person to be in this place in the story because he's able to kind of explain to them, because he, even though he is just a writer, he like still has knowledge of how they work. And he's not stupid at all. Like that's definitely the thing. And he's just kind of saying to Maeve, like, imagine what's going through that guy's mind. Like it's gonna be, he's not like you. It's gonna be, he might not, be able to reason it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Him being his, like, the chief, he was the butt of the joke in season 1 a lot, and so I think that diminished his role as, like, the chief narrative officer or whatever he actually is, but he still seems to be high enough up to really have an understanding of a lot more than you would think would be necessary for the dude just writing the stories, per se.
Well, yeah, and another good point that I saw some users make on Reddit was that Sizemore is good at his job. He was getting his job done, and they said he may not be. They really called to mind the scene where he reveals the adventure on the. We talked about this first.
Yeah, the Odyssey on the Red River.
Odyssey on the Red,
yeah.
And how, in Sizemore's mind, is like this shit sells. Like this is what brings people here. They want to go on adventures. They want to like sleep with the people here, and they want to kill people that
they want to feel like the hero. They
exactly. Yeah. And Ford, although Ford is obviously a visionary and a genius, he's like bored with it. He's like, that's not going to be my life's work. But Sizemore is like a good employee because he's creating narratives that bring people
giving
to the park.
board what they want.
Exactly. He's doing his job, and he's getting 300 stories done in 3 weeks. Like he's clearly like he's kind of a model like middle management sort of guy, which is just interesting when you look at it from like an economic and like nuts and bolts perspective. Sizemore's like pretty awesome. Because he's easy to control. Just give him like liquor and stuff. He's gonna keep working. Yeah. Like he's kind of a dream, really.
It's interesting because that really like recontextualizes his cockiness in season 1. It's kind of like he's meant to be that. Like he's cocky because he's kind of right, and that's what they want.
He knows he's important, but he's like good. He also knows he's good at his job, but he does. It's just artistic enough that his like creative side gets something out of it, but at the same time he gets booze and women, and like so his more lecherous side is still fulfilled. Yeah, he's becoming a far more interesting character than I would have thought.
Totally. I remember talking about him in season 1 being like, what are they ever gonna do with him that we're gonna care about?
It's good.
So
I also like that he speaks Japanese. He jumps in, and I was like, oh, look at that. Yep. What else has he got up? Now he's got a little radio. We'll talk about that later. He's got plans. I still don't think it's not gonna end well for him. I don't think he's gonna come out of this a hero. Yeah. But he might make some kind of sacrifice. I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. But what do I know? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like Musashi?
Musashi's really awesome.
It's he's Kaneda, right? From Sunshine?
Yes. Yeah, and he was also in he's in The Last Samurai. I can't remember who he is though. His name is Hiroyuki Sanada, and he's one of the more prominent Japanese actors in Hollywood, at least. He was in The Wolverine as well. So that's
right.
He's been in a bunch of different things, and he's always fantastic. And it's great to see him here in Westworld in a way where we get to see more of that Japanese culture. Like he gets to bring some of that over here.
We get to see him be
awesome.
Japanese.
Absolutely. But yeah, Musashi's super rad. They're all super rad. They're all cool. Awesome. I care so much more about Shogun World than I do about Westworld.
That's so funny. I knew you would.
But, you know.
Like if Rockstar made like a game in this era.
Don't even stop. You got to stop right now because that would be so. I don't want to live in a world where that doesn't exist.
See, I love Westerns so much that like when Red Dead came out, I was like, oh, this is so perfect for me. And like that for you would probably be that.
And the thing is, it's not like there's not a plethora of Japanese games for me to go and play, but I feel like Japanese culture through the lens. I don't know. I guess that means I need to go play the Yakuza games because that's what that is. Kind of.
Yeah.
At least it's not ancient Japan. It's more modern, but
yeah, isn't Sleeping Dogs also?
Sleeping Dogs is Chinese.
Okay,
but I've also heard it's very good. So I've always wanted.
Is that Triads then?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Anyway,
yeah, the Triads are the Chinese mafia, but I don't know if that's.
I think that's the.
I think they're the subject of the
backdrop.
game. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
it's
anyway.
It's definitely pretty cool. Like it's cool to be in such a different place. It's funny to call. Like Westworld feels familiar, not only because it's like English speaking, but because it's obviously based on the American West as well geographically, but because we spent the whole season there. And it's funny because it's not our American West. Like it's fabricated, and yet like taking those people and putting them here into Shogun World, it feels like a foreign land, even though Westworld is not a real place either.
Yeah, and it like. The thing is that it as someone who has been in Japan, it feels like Japan.
That's awesome.
And it's weird. Like it doesn't, even the little town, it feels like a little bit of a town that they made up, but it doesn't, I mean, you know, it's supposed to be like 1600s-ish Japan. But the landscapes and the mountain, there's a mountain that looks like Mount Fuji, and you somehow can't see it from Westworld, but it's there. But it's huge. Like, I don't know, it's...
I actually meant to talk about that when we were getting exposed to the Raj, but I wondered if at the borders of the parks there's like sort of
like a thin,
like a mirror or something, or some sort of hologram that looks like continued landscape of where you are.
It's the skyboxes. They make skyboxes like in video games essentially to kind of extend the immersion.
Yes.
That could totally be true. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah. But no, Shogun World's awesome. Speaking of Shogun World, ninja invade the Shogun World Mariposa at night, but Maeve is able to detect their attack just in time somehow. She tries to use her on-the-fly reprogramming with Japanese commands, but gets isolated and choked out by another ninja. As everyone fights, Maeve somehow is able to telepathically communicate with the ninja choking her, and she has him impale himself. The ninja retreat, calling her a witch, but they took Sakura with them. Unfortunately, the Shogun army rolls into town, and Maeve has Musashi, Hector, and Armistice buy them time as the rest of them escape. I gotta say, some of it was the fact that it was nighttime, but I also don't feel like this sequence was particularly well edited. It was very difficult to follow.
I agree 100%. Yep.
And, you know, it is dark, but the problems go beyond that.
Yes.
And so it
also felt drawn out.
Yes.
Like I kind of was like, okay,
we know
how many more times can you cut back to Hector?
We totally saw where it was going.
Yes.
We're like, okay, people are going to keep fighting. Maeve is somehow going to reprogram them, and it eventually gets there. But it just,
I agree.
It was much longer than it needed to be.
I don't think a fight between Ninja and Hector and Musashi would have gone on this long.
And it shouldn't have been as... I'm the first person who's going to walk away and be like, dude, that ninja fight was sick, and I don't care for it at all.
No.
And that's a huge bummer.
Yeah, especially considering, I mean, it's more understandable because we're really spoiled with like amazing fight choreography on TV now. We're getting better and better stuff, so that if, especially in a show with this budget and with this caliber, so when something slips, it like, seems very noticeable.
Yeah.
Fight choreography in general in film and TV is getting incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's shot poorly, which
we are in a post-Haywire world, Nick.
It's true. Is it true or what? When something is bad or just poorly executed, it really stands out. It's an eyesore now, especially like considering like I've seen the Raid movies in theaters, and after that you can't everyone has to step up their game.
Yep, for sure. Maeve being able to reprogram telepathically. Did you have any thoughts on that? I know what I think, and
I do too, but I can wait to talk about it. Unless you want to talk about it now.
We can talk about it right now because this is kind of the first instance of it. Not only takes effect in like she's able to read her surroundings and know that shuriken is coming for her, but then also she tells the dude to impale himself. I think it's her using the mesh network to reprogram people on the fly instead of speaking the commands.
I don't know how it lets her detect incoming stuff unless through the mesh network you were able to receive. Rather, she didn't see the shuriken coming, but she knew that this host was aiming and preparing to throw a shuriken at her.
Yeah.
So she didn't detect it; she detected him thinking that, which is pretty sweet. I agree. I think it's the mesh network.
Well, we've seen when they open up when the first time Maeve learns that all of her stuff is programmed and we see her responses coming up on the fly. Like, I think the idea is that she's given herself super user admin rights on the system and can therefore read all of this programming coming in. Yeah. So she can kind of, and it's not that it's programming, but these are I mean, the hosts are no longer using scripted responses; they're improvising. But she can see the logic tree that they're kind of following to do that improvisation.
And their data has to go somewhere.
Yeah,
like they have to be sending out signals somehow.
Yeah,
to something. Like machines don't just do things without some sort of evidence of it.
Well, and that's all the stuff that would have allowed a host, like if she was a human, and another human was throwing a shuriken at. Well, I guess that doesn't really work.
But another host would be
another host would be able to intervene because they would be privy to that code.
They'd be receiving that. Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's all interesting and very cool, but it sadly was delivered in like a messy fight scene that didn't work super well.
Yeah, but I agree. I think it's the mesh network.
Okay, good, sweet. Yeah, Hector's got a great line. He says, "I don't need to speak the language to recognize a puckered asshole when I see one." Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, it was good.
They survived, right? They're somewhere out there.
Yeah. Well, we see them get immediately they get captured. Yes. They don't get killed. Yeah. So we see them get taken into custody. They're at the end of this episode. They're probably right there, beyond the hill.
They're there for them to come and unharness them. The interesting thing, one of the things that somebody brought up on the quick questions thread was kind of like, why aren't the Shogun World people just killing them on sight?
It is a good question.
And my kind of conjecture with that is that they know that Maeve and Armistice and Hector are hosts and therefore don't see a need to kill them, and I think the humans are just kind of there because there's this kind of wishy-washy, hosts aren't just indiscriminately killing across the board. Like, Rebus collected a bunch of them to go get a bounty.
That's true.
So there's kind of some sort of structure in place to not necessarily kill them immediately, and then people like Dolores come along and just either murder them all or whatever. So I thought it was fun that the humans were the ones being used as meat shields, and the hosts were kind of off to the side. And the fact that Musashi and Hector and Armistice are all hosts, they probably wouldn't be killed if the Shogun army captured them, and therefore they were the ones that Maeve kind of chose to go out there and buy time.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Not that Sylvester would be useful in that kind of situation ever.
No.
Anything else on that scene?
No, I don't think so. The Shogun army looks pretty awesome when they roll up. I was like, oh, dang.
Yes, absolutely. All the production value is absolutely there.
It's crazy. That's actually one of the things I thought too, unconsciously in the moment, was like, man, this season 2 must be more expensive because maybe it's just because it's not American attire, but like it just looks so much more costly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not. They couldn't just go and like buy it at a Value World or something like that. Yeah. You're not going to find many samurai armor sets. But,
matching too.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
All right, next up, Dolores tests Teddy, asking how he would have fought off a blue tongue infection that she and her father encountered years ago. Teddy wanted to build the cow's shelter and wait it out, but Dolores reveals her father burned the infected and used the smoke to keep the flies away. She's unsure Teddy has the guts to do what must be done. Once again, we kind of know where this is going. I don't really feel like there's a whole lot to speak about on these scenes, at least up to here.
Yeah, I mean, I said it in the first episode of this season, I think, when she and Teddy have their heart-to-heart, and I was like, it's not good.
He's not buying it.
Well, she's not. I think that he is buying into it because he has to, because he's Teddy. But I said nothing about what she said to him this whole season has been genuine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Poor Teddy. I guess no, because he's been there pretty much. It's just funny that he would still be like, come on, run away with me. It's okay. So I'm like, dude, she's murdering like anyone that gets in the way. Like, you really, like, you still love this woman unconditionally? Like, that's how much is programming and how much is real?
Yeah.
At that point, I have to wonder.
Yeah, and I mean, how much does he realize is actually like he sees all of this killing, but does he really understand that there are humans that cannot be brought back from the dead like the hosts can, you know? Like, what does he really...
That's true.
What does he really understand there? So, I don't know. But, yeah, I think that's it for that scene. Sizemore tries to ply Maeve away from Akane to Snow Lake so they can continue their journey, but Maeve wants to stick with her. She also tells Sizemore that she's not sure how she telepathically dealt with the ninja. The crew come across the Delos QA team, who are nailed to trees and have bamboo cages on their heads. And Sizemore requests a pee break and notices a comm unit on one of the guards, and he hides it in his pants. Yeah, that comm unit. I think personally that's probably how Strand gets introduced here. I don't know why, since, as we stated previously, Abernathy's not there. I think that could quite possibly have something to do with it. At least we'll see if he actually gets to use it in any. I was wondering, because then at the end of that scene, he goes into the like cabin that the carriage that they're carrying along with them. I wonder if like right then he's trying to do something with it or
maybe
not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I was so happy that Sylvester just looks so pissed that he's being treated as a mule, essentially.
Just so uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
It's a pretty funny way to rope them back into it.
Yeah. The bamboo cages on the heads, I saw somebody asking about this. It seemed like it was some form of Japanese torture that was performed. Like you would essentially block off the heads and then do terrible things to their extremities. Yeah,
that I also thought of the fact that insects could get in, but you couldn't do anything about it. And it reminded me of the ants when Lawrence was being suspended upside down.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I didn't think about that at all.
Because they may come down from the tree the same way they came up from the ground there, and you wouldn't be able to swat at it or do anything.
Yeah.
Actually, I hate to invoke this, but isn't that pretty much how they dump all the bees on Nicolas Cage in The Wicker Man? Isn't his head
I believe
like
so, yeah.
some sort of cage? Ugh. Look up.
Maybe The Wicker Man is rooted in Japanese torture techniques.
Could be. Maybe Westworld is stealing from The Wicker Man. Jonathan Nolan has also YouTubed Wicker Man bees Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Which I recommend anyone listening to this go do right now.
I did want to bring up...
Just look up Nicolas Cage freaks out or something like that. It's a compilation of all of his freak out moments from his movies, and it's so
they're all very good.
It's fantastic.
Back to the Lost allegories from last season, I did hear that the exercise bike and the vinyl were not in the script at all. And it was supposed to be a treadmill. and she wanted those changes. The treadmill didn't fit on the set properly, so they ended up mixing that. But then she brought in the record because the spinning record is kind of one of those things of like continuing loop and, but anyway. So more evidence that they were not influenced by Lost, but somewhere down the chain, they obviously could have been. Potentially. Who knows?
I just had another thought about Maeve and her voice because she keeps calling it a new voice.
Yeah.
Do you think she is somehow tapping into what Ford and Bernard were using to
the bicameral mind system?
Yes. Do you think
that's very interesting?
Do you think that because
that's extremely interesting?
Like they would need to upload that, I'd imagine, in a way as a way to communicate with these hosts. I don't think it could just pipe it to them. It probably would have to happen in between at some point to shut them down, or I don't know. Maybe it comes with an update.
Well, the only thing that pulls me back from that is the fact that Ford kind of states that like only some of the hosts have that in them still, and the idea that if Shogun World was actually only made several years ago, way after Arnold died, maybe they actually have it in there.
Maybe they don't until Maeve starts using it. Maybe that's why
it's like a latent. But to me, it was
that doesn't make sense though. For I guess why she's able to receive information as well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and some people were talking about the fact that Ford seems to be able to control the host to a degree that other people cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Was maybe more evidence for him to be a host. I think if you look more closely at a lot of the scenes where Ford's doing that stuff, he does stuff with his hands. He's not actually...
Oh, I'm sure it's like tons of unconscious gestures that like words, trigger words to...
Yeah, it's probably a mix of those things. But like even the one, like it's all very subtle and very wonderfully done. But because I've watched that video that Yoop sent us probably 1,000 times, you see... When he goes to freeze the host, he just lifts his finger on his hand and they all freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nowhere near the center of the frame. It's just kind of very casually. He doesn't draw any attention to it. He just lifts his finger and he does it. And we see him control the snake with his finger too. Like a lot of that stuff, I think that was a different thing, just for anybody who was kind of wondering that. But if you want to think Ford was a host a long time ago, go ahead. We'll see that proven or disproven at some point here, I'm sure.
Maybe that Ford was a host. Maybe that was, we've had this other theory that the Ford who was shot on the stage was not the real Ford. Maybe that was his like LMD that was out there that could use, that he gave the permissions to use the mesh network essentially.
LMD is life model decoy for those that are not as big of Marvel nerds. But that certainly could be the case.
It's bad that I'm rooting for that. Like I want to see Ford return.
Yeah,
I think he's so magnificent.
I mean, he is really good,
so good.
I wouldn't be like
watching Anthony Hopkins just put on a clinic in every single episode. It's like I could imagine him walking on the set and be like, "I'm going to show you all what acting is really about." Roll him.
That's the thing is that it would be the same thing as finding out that there's a lot of copy stuff from Shogun World to me. It would be simultaneously very disappointing and also extremely
it opens a whole new door.
Yeah. Working on so many different levels. But all right, we'll move on. Maeve poses as a translator for the Chinese Imperial Envoy, which is Sizemore somehow, to try and get close to the Shogun.
Not Felix.
Yeah, not Felix. With the plan being to freeze the army with vocal commands and steal Sakura away. Sizemore notices that the Shogun isn't awake, but actually malfunctioning as there's cortical fluid leaking from his ear. Turns out he had the entire army melt their own ears shut so that the quote-unquote witch could not command them. The Shogun realizes who they are, and Akane tries to demand Sakura back from him, but he says he'll give her back if Akane dances with her. Yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot here. The Shogun does mention he killed 2,000 men in the siege of Osaka, which means that this is likely a portrayal of Tokugawa. Tokugawa is interesting in Japanese history because he's the one that decreed that if you are a foreigner, you need to leave or we will kill you when we find you.
Mm-hmm.
And he closed down Japan for hundreds of years after that, essentially. It wasn't until a later period that they reopened Japan and allowed travelers to come and see their land and open trade and stuff like that. But that's what makes it... It is kind of weird that they don't just kill the white dude or the white people as soon as they walk in, or the Mexican guy as soon as they walk in, because that's kind of how that would have happened back then. But I think if that was the case, then it wouldn't be a narratively satisfying experience
there must
to go
still
to Shogun World.
Still be some programming rattling around in there.
And there's got to be people that, like, in the sense that they are programmed, you can't just have everybody be an enemy.
Right.
If you're coming there to experience it, but interesting still. There's a lot of flags that have symbols on them, in present on this like set that they or the location that they use here. One of them is like an infinity symbol dragon that looks kind of like the double hexagon.
Of course.
There's one that kind of looks like the maze, like the man in the center of the maze, but not necessarily. There's a few other ones, but nothing that really is striking anybody as meaningful as of yet. So just kind of interesting that it's there. Not really sure exactly what it means, but yeah. Anything else in that scene?
I don't think so. I think it's interesting that he's leaking cortical fluid. I wonder what the basis for this is. How many hosts does this happen to, and why? Yeah, how often well, it seems like it's one of those things that they would get thrown an error and immediately go and fix. Yeah. Somehow. And so, like, I wonder what... Maybe it was happening enough, but you got to think that they have enough... Like, the shields around those control units probably need to be tough enough so that they don't have to, like, reprint the control unit every time they come back down, But then again, they can get shot in the head, so I don't know. Like, yeah, I just don't want to see this become like a crutch. Exactly, yeah, for the show to just lean on and be like, "Oh, this guy's leaking too." Yeah, without establishing why this happens. Like, if it's for hosts that are really overworked or what, we don't know why this so far. Like, we know why Bernard's happened, because he shot himself in the head and then didn't get the shield repaired. Like, that's I guess that was kind of the idea, at least. Like, Felix patched up the bullet wound, but it didn't fix the shield around the control unit. Yeah, that makes sense. But for this dude to just be out there and still surviving and not really having it, it seemed a little Deus Ex Machina in the sense of, like, he's not awake, he's just crazy because he's malfunctioning. But, so far I don't feel like they've necessarily, like, I think it could become a crutch, but I think it's been okay so far. And to touch on an earlier point that I forgot about, Sizemore and Maeve do have a conversation about love versus programming, and I feel like they're really hammering away on that a lot without getting too far with it as of yet. I mean, they start getting there in this episode, but it just kind of felt a little... It's feeling a little one note at this point to me. Like, they're stretching it a little thin, but we can kind of come back around. I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but I think that there's a lot of, I don't want to even say retreading, but this episode, I liked it, but I feel like this was a really good episode of TV. This is not a great Westworld episode. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It has no mystery to, there's like little things here and there, stuff we've already talked about, but this, I mean, especially coming off of episode 4, yeah, I mean, this feels almost like a different show. Yeah, totally. It's still great. Well, the fact that they're doing the like every other episode thing doesn't help that. Like, it does feel like two different shows. Yeah, in some ways, but probably by design. Yeah, we'll see. Again, it feels like sort of similar when we were talking about the Alienist. Certain things I don't feel like I can't properly talk about it until the season is over. Yeah, for sure. That's something we'll definitely have to touch on at the wrap up. Yeah. So, all right. Next scene: Angela arrives in Sweetwater with one of the Abernathy extraction team members to inform Dolores that her father was taken to the Mesa, so that's where they'll take the train. She and Teddy find a place to sleep for the night, and they finally
seemingly make love of their own volition. Interesting that it's like the first time that they choose to have sex with each other that we know of, at least, but it's seemingly the first time. It could be the first time that Teddy and Dolores ever actually had sex. Yeah. And it finally happens. And then also James Marsden's butt.
The Teddy butt counter.
Yeah. Teddy butt counter's gone up to 1.
It's up to 1. I saw this comment on Reddit and it made me laugh so hard. It was I screenshotted it and I sent it to Alex, which is where this reference is coming from. Alex isn't just necessarily. Well,
because the joke so far has like the season 1 joke was the Teddy death counter because he died at least once in most episodes. But then so far in season 2, he hasn't really died. We've seen him dead floating in the water or atop the pile of hosts, but he hasn't actually like died yet. So the fact that somebody started the Teddy butt counter is pretty good.
And it just literally said Teddy butt counter : 1. But the comments that ensued were what made it so good. I'm trying to pull it up right now and give credit to the user because it was really funny. It got a good laugh out of me. The user, who was titled Disapproved 1972, said Teddy butt count 1. And then a reply said it was as perfect as I thought it would be. And then after that someone said, oh, there's more now. I was looking for the one earlier that said, have you ever seen anything so full of splendor?
I didn't dig deep enough for that one, but that's so good.
Yeah, it was awesome. All these comments are so funny.
Oh, God. The internet's funny sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Especially like on shows like this. It was as perfect as I thought it would be. Someone else said, she better break out the paints and put down some of that natural splendor. Teddy's splendor deserves to be painted like one of her French girls. Someone else said, so golden, I want to smack it like a drum.
Oh, that's incredible.
I literally just came to this thread to see the discussion about his beautiful tuchus. Yeah, it was really funny conversation. I mean, the whole thread was like a lot of really funny stuff about the episode, but this one comment just really made me laugh, just the Teddy butt count.
Yeah, very good.
This is in the official Westworld post-episode discussion on our Westworld.
Yes.
Is actually, which if you're listening to this and you don't already go to that, beware, spoilers and theories, obviously, but it's a good place immediately after watching an episode to go and like read some quick thoughts about what other people are thinking. Yeah,
just kind of, there were a lot of people that really didn't like this episode. Like,
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
I get it, but and it's not like the Dolores stuff is mostly wearing thin a little bit, but it feels like it's going to come to a head.
I feel like we're only going to spend an episode or maybe 2 in Shogun World, and then we might exit and head back to Westworld.
Yep.
But it's been a pretty interesting detour.
For sure.
Certainly. Yeah. Although we have to talk about the end of this episode, so.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, not much else to say there. So we'll go on to Maeve and Akane find Sakura's back has been mutilated as they get ready for the dance. There's a cherry blossom tree that has been carved into her back, and Sakura means cherry blossom.
Woof.
Akane tries to comfort Sakura with the same story that Maeve used in season 1 to lure in brothel customers. Maeve attempts to wirelessly awaken Akane, but Akane refuses, and Maeve realizes that some things are too precious to lose, even to be free.
Important.
Yes.
Very, very important moment.
And like this is... it's hard to talk about this without going on to the next scene for me. I guess I'll wait to bring that up, But Maeve learning that, I think, is her becoming more of that benevolent host leader that I thought she maybe is becoming as of this season, and didn't see her becoming at all in the last season.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting to me. Yeah. The echoing of the dialogue from the previous season being used in a new context, I think, is very cool. The story that ends with, this is a new world, and in this world you can be whoever you want. I think, we see it's cool because they use that line multiple times in one episode with Maeve, because she keeps trying to lure. She's having trouble luring customers in, and they try to do some quick fixes to make it happen, and it doesn't work. But then finally, as Elsie gets her hands on it, changes things, and she's back to normal essentially. But so that particular line gets hammered into our brains a little bit, and to see them call it back here in a different context seems very skillful and interesting and cool.
It is cool too, and I think for Maeve, she realizes the beauty that like these. I think she's taking away from her knowledge of the guest / like human experience. She's kind of understanding that good can come out of them, and that their words and their ideas can be used for good, because I think she used it in a very specific way to try to lure guests in to have sex, basically. And now there's this host comforting another host who
comforting her daughter, essentially.
Yeah, who has been tortured.
Yeah.
And I think Maeve is starting to see what I was talking about a couple episodes ago, where I think I was saying that Teddy would be able to see the goodness in humanity, but Dolores cannot. And I think Maeve is kind of getting to that point where she's able to see.
Which, on the flip side, is kind of... I'm reaching into the next scene here, but Dolores saying that there are some people that aren't good enough or that cannot make it. They're part of the herd that need to be burned in order to...
Yes.
Like, maybe that quote-unquote weakness for humanity is something that Dolores sees as a detriment and thinks this will not get us, this will not win us the world. You know?
Well, and it's interesting that maybe part of this just comes from the motherhood experience, but Dolores seems to view the hosts as livestock. Like she's pretty much just looking at them as a commodity, as an animal to be herded and corralled, and she can view them as something. Ultimately, there's something simple to her. She seems to think like she's elevated and the rest of them aren't or can't be, or that puts her above them. Whereas I think Maeve is starting to feel this sort of unifying compassion for all of them.
For life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially that she has truly been like behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Like Dolores might remember it, but she hasn't experienced it freshly yet. Yeah. And Maeve has recently, and she's able to see just how fleeting and precious it can be. Plus Dolores, although Dolores does have the like resurrect ability with her, whereas Maeve doesn't, which is interesting.
Well, she's got Felix with her, but we haven't seen Felix with his tablet. So
yeah, I don't think Maeve has stumbled onto the idea yet that she could do that, whereas Dolores is exploiting that pretty hard already.
And like Armistice and Hector, they got changed around too, so they kind of function past being shot, where other hosts do not anyway. She hasn't needed to revive anybody necessarily. Before we move on from Maeve, the fact that she attempts to awaken Akane, and Akane doesn't want that. Like her kind of, it's like a loss of innocence essentially, or like the losing the rose-colored glasses that you see things through, although they're in kind of a horrible situation anyway. But like removing that awakening removes the innocence, and like it has you thinking of the things of like, is this just programmed into me or not? Like the fact that she would be giving all of that context to Akane would ruin the relationship that she has with Sakura.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Maeve kind of sees that and is like, I don't want to disturb that.
It is cool. It makes you wonder how much information is being passed, because Akane seems to grasp kind of what is going to happen to her.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, pass.
Yep.
I also wonder if like on more strong, ultimately, I mean, from a human perspective, I should view them all on like the same playing field, because they are all like a creation, a machine essentially. But I wonder if some of them that are more strong-willed than others are able to kind of make a decision or at least intervene.
Yeah.
Or if Akane is just that remarkable and that strong, because like the ninja she does it to earlier just accepts it and then goes and kills himself.
Well, but I don't think she was necessarily...
I guess she wasn't sharing information with him.
Yeah, she wasn't awakening him per se. She was just rewriting his code. Whereas with Akane, it seemed more like it was passing... Like she's unlocking permissions and passing, like opening up information for her rather than just issuing a command
or saying, "I will enlighten you."
Yeah,
and she's like, "I don't
want
really
that."
Want that.
Yeah. All right.
It is crossing over again into this kind of religious territory.
Dolores wakes Teddy up to show him something, explaining that she has been questioning her feelings for him and whether or not they were just programming. But this night has shown her that it's real. But she also sees that he's not going to make it in the new world, so she has her crew hold him down and uses the technician she acquired in episode 2 to reprogram him. This is a little bit... I kind of called this. I didn't know it was coming in this form, but the idea that Dolores is shedding her love... Like, she knows she loves Teddy, but she sees it as a weakness in herself and therefore kind of takes him out of the equation in that sense. Like, she's going to knowingly manipulate his personality and who he is to become a tool for her and therefore ignore the programmed love or the learned love of him to affect some ends, I think is horrifying.
This is dark. Like, this is the darkest thing Dolores has done.
Yeah.
I think. This is... I mean, aside from, like, Ford and Arnold, this is the first real outright murder it feels like she's committed. Or, I mean, aside from those guys count, too. But, I mean, if you are overriding Teddy... you're killing him.
Yeah.
And not in a way that he can be brought back necessarily. Not he can't just be like, you know, ignore all his wounds and come back to life like the other guys did. Like, you're deleting Teddy.
Yeah.
Delete old Teddy. And that's horrible and really sad.
Mm-hmm. I wish there was another way, Teddy. But where we're about to go, it's no place for a man like you. I'm so sorry.
You sure you want this? Like, change is this extreme. Without a full reset, I can't guarantee that he'll hold together.
To grow, we all need to suffer.
So we can see insane Teddy.
It's very sad because Teddy's great, but also, like, this is what pushes her into, like, full supervillain status.
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty evil.
It's like it's like a Sith killing their master kind of situation. Not that they're like master and apprentice, but like the idea that you...
Yeah. I mean, it's the soul stone,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty horrible. It's also horrifying because if she thought her love for Teddy was a weakness, you could cast him out. You could say, like, you have to just ride east and leave, otherwise I'll have to kill you. But I guess maybe she thinks that he'll just say, I'm not going to leave, Dolores. You're going to have to just do it. But she's taking any sort of say he has in the matter out of his hands, which is what's really gross.
She's like, I'm in love with your personality, so I'm deleting it so I can still use you as a tool.
Because your gun-wielding skills are awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's gross. It's really, really, really foul.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer. I feel like this is the end of Teddy as we've known him. We're going to see, like, some crazy dialed up to 10 murder machine Teddy. We might have some fun watching James
ready
Mars
for that.
Yeah,
exactly.
It might be fun, but it's really sad because all Teddy has done is die, and all he wants is just to be with Dolores, and he finally gets it, and then she just kills him.
Yeah. Yeah. When she walks into the store, she picks up the can on her own, which is an interesting little detail. The idea that I don't need you, Teddy, because I'm going to pick up my own can.
Teddy.
Yeah, poor Teddy.
It's rough.
All right, and then the final scene here. Akane and Sakura take the stage to perform for the Shogun, but the Shogun kills Sakura to spite Akane. Akane performs her dance anyway to a Japanese instrumentation arrangement of Cream by Wu-Tang Clan, and then ends her dance by opening the Shogun's head like a tin can. The Shogun's army readies to kill Akane and Maeve, but Maeve wirelessly reprograms them to attack each other. And one of the Shogun army men hits a gong to call reinforcements, and Maeve readies herself for the attack, saying she's found a new voice, and now we use it. Yeah, I don't know.
Pretty nuts.
The death of the Shogun was extremely gruesome.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. I still don't know exactly what. Like, she, like, stabbed him in his neck, and then, like, went for his, like, cheek.
She, like, sawed through. I think she stabbed, like, one cheek and then, like, sawed all the way around
his head.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a real sharp knife, or she's real strong, or a bit of both. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I like the way it was shot because it was, like, in the background, sort of, like, as he, like, stands up, and it just kind of. Like the trope in movies of like a character getting sliced and then getting up and being like, guys, what happened? And then their face sliding off is like, it's so bad. It happens way too much in movies. The fact that it ever happened once is a problem, and it continued to happen in movies for a long time. But this was cool.
It's very much a Japanese influence, anime-ish type thing. The idea like you slice through someone with a sword and they don't realize it / fall to pieces until after they've like started to move or something like that. It's very much
it was neat,
rooted in that. But yeah, it was fun. And plus the fact that he's a robot, like he could actually do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm not saying not saying in this show this is unrealistic. The ice pack has been broken. Fun police, get in here.
Somebody mentioned on Reddit, and I unfortunately, because I haven't watched nearly enough Kurosawa or any Japanese filmmaker, said the moment where Maeve says, "Akane, you are a true mother," and Maeve says, "Arigato, Maeve," is something very rooted in Japanese cinema as well. The idea of like having that, I don't know if it's mercy or realization or the idea that like someone is a true form of what they want to be or say they are, I think is something that comes through, especially in the scenes of like them about to be killed or assassinated or martyred for something they believe in.
It's like paying someone the ultimate compliment.
Yes. Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And then Haggard got murdered. Not really. Yeah, I didn't know it was a Wu-Tang song.
I knew it had to be something at this point, but I was like, I can't place it.
Yeah, I don't listen to much. I don't know if that strikes anybody as off base, but I don't listen to a whole lot of Wu-Tang in my life. But I did go back and listen to the actual song. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
Totally
so if you knew it, you would know it.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. But yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts on that final scene?
The Shogun World scenes seemed to go on forever sometimes. They were very long. Like there was a moment where I needed to stop watching, like probably about halfway through, and I was like, when the scene's over, and it just kept going. And I was like, okay, this scene has been going on for like 12 minutes. But this one was also long, but it was really cool. I liked the actual dance was really interesting. I like the way that, I'm sure this is how the actual style of like geisha dancing or whatever happened. But like the way her movements were timed so well with like the crescendos and like sudden stops of the instruments was really awesome. And I actually found myself going, man, how did they shoot this? Did the actress actually do it in time with them, or did they just overdub the music after? I was really intrigued. But all the dancing was really cool, and the actual murder was so again, it was so telling. I was like, okay, we know what she's gonna do. She's gonna pull some shit out of her hair and kill him.
Yeah, the fact that she's able to walk up to him is like a leap anyway. But you know.
But the ending is pretty cool. I feel like Maeve is going to, besides know how to be awesome with a sword, see, she doesn't really have any interest in having an army. That's the problem. As a viewer, I'm telling her in the back of my mind, like, dude, get an army. You're going to need an army. And what better than an army of, like, badasses with swords and armor, like, that will shrug off bullets and just come in close and just murder some reprogrammed cowboys. But like that's what I want her to do. She's like, I have this newfound voice. I say we use it, and I feel like she's prepping for violence, or at least that's how it seems. But I think she's probably going to tell them all to chill. I don't know.
Yeah, like
I wish Maeve was. I know how practical and pragmatic she can be, but I wish she was pragmatic enough to say, how about instead of making all these guys kill each other, I just tell them to follow me.
I think that certainly makes sense. Like I think she's somebody who would see safety in numbers in this situation, and the fact that there's ninja around that she can perceive of at a moment's notice, it makes sense for her to start to have a larger group of people around her that can help protect her.
I think she's a believer in the old, like, a small team can slip through unnoticed kind of thing. Like, she just wants to get to the homestead, just a pack of like 4 or 5 people, Sizemore dressed like a poor guy with a donkey. Like, I get her plan, but it just keeps failing because they keep being stumbled upon, and there are too many variables out there now. I feel like she has to run the math and say, listen, we already ran into Ghost Nation and they almost like murdered us. now we're here and we went through this whole ordeal. Like, I need to just bring an army of invincible Shoguns with me.
Yeah.
And
she's had too many close calls with everything.
Right. I feel like that this needs to follow a logical conclusion for me anyway. Plus, I just really want to see the scene of like Dolores on horseback leading a bunch of like ruffians into like Maeve with a whole army of like samurai and ninjas and everyone from Shogun World. Like just a dragon, why not? I just want to see that.
Sounds fantastic.
Sounds so good.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I don't know why in my mind it's such a foregone conclusion that these two are going to end up warring with each other, but it feels like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it might not be till season 3.
Yeah,
or 4.
I was going to say, I don't know that it would happen in season 2, but it feels like they are being set up as...
I think the problem is that they don't know what each other is about right now. Like, they had that moment where they kind of passed each other, and she was like, join me. And she's like, no, I'm on my way to go do this, and don't get in my way or else. And it was cool that Dolores was like, oh, shit, like, I can't step to her. She's on something else. But I don't think that they obviously have no way of knowing how each other feels about just, like, about life in general right now. So they don't know that they have a reason to just beef with each other.
Maybe that will be what presents itself in that in the final. Like, I don't know, the whole thing. The fact that we have no sense of what Maeve is up to in the 2 weeks later timeline makes me very curious about that. And it would be interesting if by the end of this season we know that they see themselves on other sides of the line. But it doesn't come to a head until later on. I
think they're both heading in the same direction. They don't know it. Dolores is going by train and Maeve is going by foot. Yeah. And I think they're both heading ultimately to kind of the same place. Well, to the Valley Beyond, or
I don't know. Like Maeve has that endpoint of like getting to the homestead, and with Dolores getting the train to go to the Mesa, like I don't quite see exactly where they'll cross paths again, but they probably will. We'll see.
I think so.
Anything else?
Don't think so. Again, that like it was a good episode, but it didn't feel like a good Westworld episode to me. I always like leaving Westworld going like, what? And like having more questions, and that sounds cheap. I don't want it to feel like this show is only good because of the like
mystery box.
Yeah, again, I hate to compare it to Lost, but I will never forget the sensation of watching Lost season 1 on DVD, and you'd be like just watching, and then it just that title would come that said Lost out of nowhere, and you'd be like, oh, one more, and you'd have to watch another one. Yep. Like my brother and I stayed up till like 3 a.m. watching Lost, like all the time.
Yeah,
because it would hook you like that, and it is easy to reduce that down to like, oh, it's just a gimmick, but I mean it's good TV also. If that mystery, because like bad TV shows end on cliffhangers, you just laugh and go, okay, who cares?
Well, the thing is that I feel like each of these episodes, the first 4 episodes of this season, have blown the world open in so many different ways each time that we get to this episode that is more character development than anything else, that it feels like not much is going on. And
that's true, and which is kind of a shame to say, like, boo, more character development, but the show has in the past managed to develop the characters further while also providing some really compelling mystery and again expanded the world. So we know they're more than capable of it, and it wasn't a bad episode at all. I did like it, but it definitely did not arrest me visually. Like there were moments during this one where I like turned away because I was like doing things at home. I was like watching it on my iPad and like carrying it with me from room to room, and there were moments where I like looked away entirely. Yeah. It just was like, whatever.
But like I'm extremely bummed that our first experience with Shogun World wasn't like it should have been primed to be my favorite episode of the season. And that's not fair because there's so much other amazing, awesome stuff that happened obviously in the previous episode and the
I think
if
it had been the first or last episode of the season, it would have been better. But because we're right in the middle of all these ongoing mysteries and threads, it feels like a giant detour, which it is. I mean, it's literally like a detour out of Westworld, Which is fine, but I agree with what you're saying. Like, Shogun World almost felt like more of an annoyance and a distraction.
Yeah.
Than like, okay, I want to get back to Westworld, though.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying. Like, if the season had opened on it, it would have been awesome because it would be like, whoa, look at this, so different. But
if it wasn't like it wasn't a purposeful detour, it was a mistake, and I think they logically get there. But the fact that there is literally no reason for them to be there.
Mm-hmm. Beyond this episode,
feels like it hurts things overall. Like it hurt the flow of the season, in my opinion. But,
a little bit, but at least it was. We're still, even if it did hurt the flow, I'm glad we're still somewhat earlier in the season. We have time to like kind of get back on track, and this one will just be like a bit of a hiccup.
Yeah,
maybe
that's fair.
It's not. It's hard to even call it a hiccup.
It's
though.
not bad.
Still
It's
not bad.
All right. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on westworld.fm. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Podcasts. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can email us at westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. The Midwest Podcast Network has several other shows about video games, horror movies, and more. Check out all of our podcasts at midwestpodcastnetwork.com. Our theme music is the song Industrial Cinematic by Kevin MacLeod, and it is being used under an Attribution Creative Commons license. And that's it for our episode this week. We are excited for the next episode of Westworld, and we'll have another episode of our podcast out after that. But until then, may you rest and have a deep and dreamless slumber.